Hello and welcome everybody to what's going to be another episode of The Verdict. I am Spram 1000 and today we are going to talk about Star Wars Jedi Survivor. So I played Jedi Fallen Order very late. I played both of these games with my friend Gundam Otaku, who's a longtime friend of mine. He's really big into Star Wars. He knows a lot about it. I'm a pretty big fan of Star Wars myself. He knows more, so it's just cool. We talked over and stuff like that. But in keeping in line with the previous game, Jedi Survivor is a Souls-style game set in the Star Wars universe. It follows Cal Kestis about 5 years after the end of the last game, where Cal, now working alone, is trying to continue the fight against the Empire on his own terms. And to that end, he gets involved with a plot line involving a mystical planet called Tanalorr, while also just constantly trying to stay one step ahead of the Empire. So, right off the bat, I'm gonna, usually I open and I talk about the gameplay or the story. We need just to really quickly take a minute. I have to say, this game has performance problems. In fact, notoriously, or I guess I should say infamously, the launch of this game on almost every platform was riddled with bugs, problems, glitches, etc. So, bearing that in mind, I'm not sure how many of them will be patched in the future. When I beat the game about a week ago, it was playable. I mean, I played it 1 week late after the first big patch. I'm sure they will continue to have more and more patches to this game as time goes on. I don't think they're going to do DLC to it. They don't really seem to make DLC. They didn't make DLC for the last one, and I don't know if there's any plans for this one, which is nice. That's another topic, right? Whether DLC is necessary for games, whatever. We're not going to get into that. But this game may just permanently not play amazingly. The first game had no problems. It was great. But to be fair, the first game was smaller in scope. This game, Cal finds himself exploring, I would say, some bigger worlds, right? So, for example, to get into the gameplay, as I said, it's a Soul-style game. You can jump, Cal can, platform around the environment. He could force pull ropes to swing from and dash through the air and do things like that. If you've played Star Wars games before, you're probably familiar with a lot of these. That said, Star Wars Jedi Survivor also is very big on the combat, right? So returning from the previous game is the ability to parry enemy attacks. Again, if you've played any sort of Dark Souls style games, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. You parry, you can counter attack, you have different fighting styles that you could use. Now, unlike Fallen Order, where there were only two fighting styles, single-bladed lightsaber and double-bladed lightsaber, in honor of his master, Jaro Tapal, with only one move allowing for a brief amount of dual wielding. In this game, they have completely expanded the different styles of lightsaber that you could use. So there is single-bladed, there's double-bladed, they both return. Dual wield has now been made into a full-on big stance, and there's two brand new ones, one of which is Crossguard, which is like Kylo Ren's lightsaber, and then there's also what is it called? It's not called Survivor. It's not called Smuggler. You get the gun. You get to use a gun, basically, a blaster alongside of it. Now, obviously, you can't just hose enemies down because that would make the game too easy. You have to use some amount of melee in conjunction with the blaster in order for you to keep shooting it. Okay. Obviously, things like parrying are always going to be important in a game like this. Now, you do have BD1 who's able to heal. He also has a couple of different new abilities that you could use, like being able to shoot debris on the ground to create flame circuits that you could use to solve puzzles. He can also shoot electric bolts that will energize sockets. And as always, throughout the game, like with the first game, you're free to re-explore earlier planets and earlier areas, to travel around them and find different things. And that's one thing I really like about this game that I remember researching after I beat the first one, is that they took a lot from Zelda and Metroid when designing this game. And when I read that, light bulbs went off in my head and I loved it. It was beautiful. And you could really see that sort of Metroidvania style design as you go around different places and fight enemies and traverse the overworld. So, as I said, this game takes place 5 years after the previous game. Cal is now separated from his teammates, and he's been trying to keep the fight up against the Empire by continuing to work for Saw Gerrera. That said, After the start of the game, some twists and turns find Cal on a planet called Kobo, which is out somewhere in the sticks of the galaxy, where they discover that there's this planet called Tanalorr, and that it could be a safe haven for them. And the entire plot of the game is basically an effort to reach Tanalorr. That said, what happens is that most of the game, the story... See, the problem is that whenever you have a brand new IP, a brand new game, right, in a series, the first game usually feels the freshest because it's introducing that concept. It's introducing those characters. It's introducing those locations, right? Whereas the problem is that with this game, I feel like it's not that the story is bad. It doesn't even necessarily feel like it's really like a spin-off or like, like a filler arc. I just wish that there was more of fighting the Empire in this game, right? Obviously Cal being a Jedi between the, episodes 3 and 4, it's a big deal, right? He's trying to keep the fight going with the Empire. He's trying to, just survive, literally survive, right? And all that. And I feel like it would be more impactful and more meaningful if while he's doing that, there's also some amount of visiting earlier worlds or visiting other worlds, right? Even if it's new worlds or new locations, so that way Cal can keep fighting the Empire and maybe like have a plot line basically where you're working with Saw Gerrera, something like that, right? Sadly, we don't get that in this game. For the most part, the game focuses on the Tanalorr plot, which it's not bad, but again, I wish there was more of what made, what the backdrop of the game kind of feels like. So, one thing that they did change about this game, though, in addition to the worlds just being bigger, is that the worlds themselves now have fast travel, which if you remember playing the original game, there was no fast travel between different rest spots, right? Like in Dark Souls, we have bonfires. In this game, we have rest spots, right? We have spots where Cal can just stop and regenerate his health, regenerate his force, but when you rest at them, which is a conscious button push you have to make, it respawns all enemies. So I actually much prefer that they have fast travel. That was one thing I really wish that they had patched in to Fallen Order, but yeah. I think that that's probably one of the biggest things they add in the open world. You can now also mount and ride creatures, but the thing I really don't like about this game is that Kobo pretty much feels like the only planet that got a real large amount of attention, unfortunately. Because there's a couple other planets in the game, and they mostly feel just kind of linear. They don't really have the same amount of attention as Kobo, not even like by a wide margin. They feel very straightforward. You go up to this place and that's it. And while I get that the majority of the game focuses around Kobo and its proximity to Tanalorr, like I said, I wish that there were maybe like something else, something more to really keep it going, because I just feel like they're missing out. It feels like a lot of these other places feel like side distraction areas before you get back to Kobo and progressing that. So I wish that there were more planets, maybe like one or two more, that had more or less the same amount of attention and love and care put into them. That said, I like the combat as always. I think this is a very refreshing take on both Star Wars combat and just the Soulsborne series in general. I really do like parrying. I like the different lightsaber styles that you could switch between them. But if I had two big complaints about it, it would be one, I kind of wish that they had merged single-bladed and blaster together since they're both almost the same style. And two, I kind of wish you could just swap between all four. And then that way you could have a game where you just have more options, because I feel like being limited to two different lightsaber styles is a little bit too restrictive. I kind of wish you could swap between all four in this one, right? We alter it single blade to also have the blaster as well. So that way you have different styles and there's more experimentation. For me, I just never really used things like crossguard or single blade. I didn't want to use because we used it the entirety of the first game basically. But double bladed, I was pretty much my go-to. I just personally prefer it. And dual wield was good because you can cancel strikes. It's very fast. It allows you to really quickly maneuver around and things like that. And while each style has a different heavy move that you execute by pushing Y or I guess triangle, I kind of wish that there was more. What's the word I'm looking for? I wish that there was more ways to use each lightsaber, right? Because, like, for example, dual wield has a move that basically allows you to counter enemies. But enemies have red attacks, which are basically unblockables, and it doesn't work on that. So I kind of wish that that just had something more to it. You know, it had something more going for it. On the flip side, Dual Blade has a lot of that. It has power, it has good block stamina because you have a block meter that when depleted, you basically get stunned. But at the same time, you can't cancel out of attacks that easily. Like, once you attack, you're very committed. And I wish that the lightsaber differences between all these different styles wasn't as massive, basically. I kind of wish that lightsaber styles were more like personal combat choices, right? Than, oh, well, if you choose double-bladed, right, you just can't really parry anything. You know what I mean? You're just kind of stuck just doing whatever. I kind of wish that that was not the case as well. So, that's fine. I wish that the timing for parrying was a little bit more lax as well, between all the different styles. And some of them, obviously, I like playing with crossguard. I thought it was kind of fun. It's not exactly how Kylo handles his in the movies, but it was still pretty good. It's still pretty cool enough. Beyond that, what else? I like the exploration. I like the overworld. I don't really have much to say about the enemies. I think, again, continuing with Fallen Order, a lot of it is references to things like from the Clone Wars, which at this point in the timeline didn't happen all that long ago. I like seeing the galaxy from beyond the scope of the movies, right? You're playing as someone who's kind of coming up in their own way. They only have so much that they could do, right? Because Cal was only a Padawan when Order 66 happened. But like I said, the story itself, which focuses mostly on Tanalorr and High Republic era Jedi, just doesn't feel as refreshing, I guess. I'm not sure if it's mostly just because they didn't really have a lot of Empire presence in it, where the Empire's there, and, you know, you're fighting them on different planets and stuff, maybe working for Saw Gerrera, which I think would have been a huge positive and a huge plus. But at the same time, I do kind of wish that there was more for that, right? Like, more of a presence of, like, yes, we are still fighting the Empire, we still have to do our usual thing, but we're also trying to find Tanalorr. It feels like Tanalorr takes too much of a front row seat. But yeah. Beyond that, I do like all the different things that they brought to life in this, right? The characters of the story are just great, right? Cal, Marin, Seer, Grease, all these characters are very iconic in my mind now. I definitely feel like I really like them the most out of anything I've seen come out of Star Wars in a long time. And I mean, that's another topic about Star Wars in general. But I do really enjoy different aspects of this game. I do really feel like when you get introduced to these characters and you get to know them, it's fun. I think that they do a great job bringing this world to life. So, that said, Fallen Order's weakness is definitely not its cast. It's more the story, I feel. Beyond that, I think this game has a very, very lackluster plot twist. I think it really kind of comes out of nowhere. It doesn't mesh well with the rest of the story. And mostly because it doesn't, again, like I said, you're not really fighting the Empire as much in this game. There's not really like another bit of story that I could really latch on to and say, all right, well, this is the real one that I really liked, right? Like, that's just kind of it, you know what I mean? So, all in all, while I like different aspects of Fallen Order, I do kind of wish that the story was maybe a little bit more, not backseat, but what's the word? What's the phrase I'm looking for? Not like in the back or whatever. I do kind of wish there was more to bite on, I guess. I wish that there was more than just, oh, well, we're looking for Tanalorr and that's it. That said, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but this game mostly focuses on, like, characters. It feels, like I said, it doesn't feel enough like a filler arc where I feel like you could just disregard things. But it also kind of feels like, you know, it's not anything, like, super ridiculous, right? You know there's going to be a twist, and then that's kind of it. Like, the plot is not as different or crazy out there as Fallen Order was. So, that said, the gameplay is fine. The overworld traversal is good. I like that you can revisit areas, as always, and being able to see different things. So, what would I give Fallen Survivor? I never got to say the name right. What would I give Jedi Survivor? Well, Jedi Survivor is a great game. First and foremost, I don't think I could say that it's a bad game, but the game does not perform as well as it could have, okay? That said, it's got performance issues, man. It's got a lot of performance issues. It's a good game. I think that, you know, the different enemy types are cool. I wish that being able to parry was a little bit more responsive for different types of weapons, as opposed to just dual wield feeling like the de facto one that you really need to use. But at the same time, I do like the combat, I do like the complexity, and I just wish there was more of what made Fallen Order feel refreshing and interesting, man. So what would I give it? I would probably have to give this game like an 83. And the reason why is because those performance issues are just terrible at points. But at the same time, they lead to funny glitches that aren't like game breaking or anything. I don't think the game crashed on me, which is good. But at the same time, they definitely needed a little bit more time in the oven to finish cooking. You know what I mean? And while it is still fun, and if you like the first game, you'll definitely like the second one. I do think that there was definitely something that they needed to do more with the story and the performance. So, that said, that's going to be it for this verdict, and I will see you next time. Very nice.